Hello, everybody. Today, I'd like to talk about automated deployments with robots. It's not that fancy as with flying drones and stuff, so there's no hardware involved, but I hope we can still make something cool. I'd like first to introduce myself. I'm Ole Michaelis. I'm from Hamburg in Germany. I'm 25 years old. I'm considering myself as an open source loving web nerd, whatever that really means, but I love open source, I love the web, and that's where I'm really based. Actually, I'm not considering myself as a JavaScript developer. So when I started, I was more like this full stack developer. So doing backend, front end, all kind of stuff. Over the years have passed, I'm more becoming a PHP guy. So now I'm more like a backend guy, but I still love JavaScript and of course Node. So don't expect any front-end knowledge from me, please. I work for Jimdo. We are building a homepage creator tool set so that like everybody can create a website. So I used to introduce Jimdo as we make your mama creating websites, which is really cool, makes lots of fun. Because when you see people creating websites with just their mouse, so it's like you can create a website with just your mouse. And you're seeing like your mama creating websites. Oh, I want to like a headline here, an image gallery here. It's pretty cool to see. Yeah, back to topic. Hubot, or let me say robots for deployment. I like to start with the beginning because when we're just getting like robots and deployments, and I just want to clarify a few things before. Let's talk about deployments. What does a deployment really mean? Deployment is like putting your code in production. Who of you would considering yourself somehow being involved in deployment process in your company? Okay, quite a few, great. So maybe I might have a few cool new tricks for you. There are different approaches getting your code into production. What's mostly used is like somehow copy your code onto the server. It's like using rsync from one single sourcing, or doing SVN up on each machine, or doing SCP. And the fancier companies are even using BitTorrent for using their deployments, which is pretty cool. So they're just packing a package and distributing them via BitTorrent. This is amazing. Really important when we're talking about deployment, it's deploy often. So especially in the agile world, and when you're working with Scrum, for example, you tend to deploy like every release. So you're building your software for about 2-3 weeks or maybe for months. And when it's done, you pack it and you ship it to the servers. And for me, that's not the right way, because what might have happened in the last 2 weeks might have also introduced some bugs. So you're deploying the bugs from 2 weeks live. And this is bad. So I'm a big fan of continuous deployment. This is what we also do. We're using Kanban, so it's another agile method, and which means whenever a feature is done, you should deploy it to your live servers. And continuous deployment is just the next step after continuous integration. So when we're talking about continuous integration, who of you have experience with Jenkins or Travis or Bamboo and like stuff? Oh, this is great. So you met the prerequisites. What does continuous delivery has a real need for? So there are a few constraints you really have to meet when you want to do continuous delivery. And this is you have to have tests. Like Sebastian mentioned, you have to have front-end tests, you have to have back-end tests. It's best when you have like full-stack tests. So you need more tests, even more tests, or you would end up like this. Or you can just trust your coworkers. So you need tests in general, right? For real, we have like unit testing. This means you have just a single unit of code. This is usually in more my PHP land and some kind of a method, or in JavaScript land it would most be like a function or maybe an object. You have integration tests, which should test that the integration between your objects and methods should do right. So you're not mocking the whole stuff out, like you have dependencies to 3 other objects, and you would all mock them 3. You would test the dependencies as well. There's also functional tests, which mean more like end-to-end tests. So you have something like a staging environment where you really fire HTTP requests, seeing what the database is doing, and evaluating the response. And you have also acceptance tests, where it's more like your customer is clicking through the website, and he can assure that his requirements are met. And of course, there's a lot of in-between, like behavior testing and stuff. But this won't be the topic for today. So a typical continuous delivery process, how should it look like? What's the best? Of course, first of all, it starts with a commit or a push or both, depending on your version control system. And then some kind of a continuous integration process should trigger the tests. So you're doing integration tests, unit tests, front-end tests, acceptance tests, all things which are automated, hopefully automated. And when you're really doing continuous delivery, then there's a deploy. So now you have your pretty well tested code live in production. And when you want to do 100% like real experts work, you have tests again, and you'll test your live environment. Like, I really recommend to test the features which gives you the money. So when you sell something, you should really assure that the selling process and the checkout works. So far for deployment. Next is like a hubot. Who of you know hubot? Okay, quite a few, that's good. I'd like to start with an example of what hubot is. Hubot basically is a chat robot. So he joins your company chat, and it's just like idling around, and you can program him with commands. And I emulated a console here in Keynote. So you can also start hubot in command line mode, which means that the chat adapter is just like the CLI. And you can query him things, like what the rules, and he just responds. And he also can more like not so useful stuff. You can make him to query for images, and so we get Jan. Yeah, hubot is invented by GitHub. A fun story. They had hubot long before the open source did, but they said it was so crap code they don't want to open source it, so they rewrote it and open sourced it. And yeah, it's written in CoffeeScript using Node and has lots of storing engines, and the default is like Redis. And when you're hosting it on any platform as a service provider, you can also use Redis to go. There are lots of chat adapters around, like I've shown you the chat one, and there's also the hipchat, I think is one around. No, Campfire, sorry. Campfire is the one around. These both are built in, and there are like 15 others of chat adapters. So hubot can join like Twilio, Twitter, XMPP, Gtalk, Yammer, Skype, all this around, even iMessage. And yeah, there are lots of scripts around. So hubot ships with a default of 14 inbuilt scripts, like CoffeeScript scripts, which train him like the default behavior, which I showed you, like what are the rules, give me an image, and this sort of stuff. Plus there's lots, tons, a bunch, millions of third-party scripts around. So when I first gave this talk, it was 2 months ago, the numbers were like 8 built in and 200 something third-party scripts. And in 2 months, we like doubled all the amount of scripts around, and it's great. So it's heavily growing. And I want to show some cool examples which you can do with hubot. To be honest, the best examples are from GitHub. There's GitHub Play, which is where the part of hubot is just a tiny part of the whole Play ecosystem. The Play ecosystem means that you have a music stream around, so that the whole company, even when you're such distributed as GitHub is, can have the same music. And you can put the music into that by a live DJ in company or something. And you can control this music by hubot. So you can just say, hubot, play me like Daft Punk, or hubot, skip this track, and stuff like this. And another really cool project is MakeMe, which is basically a server for a 3D printer. That's the photo of their setup I found at the blog. And before they have this hubot stuff, you have to go with your Cinema 4D layout to the printer and hook it up into the printer, and then you have to wait until the whole process is done. And when your working laptop is like hooked up to the printer, you can't work. And such a printing process could take up like 2 hours. You could say, okay, yeah, this is great for having a break, but it's not really efficient. So they put up something like a server, which you can see on the image on the left. And to control this server, they're also using hubot. So they can send hubot the Cinema 4D templates, and hubot will go into the server and print them, which is pretty cool. And of course, hubot is great for having fun and doing bullshit in chat. I've prepared lots of few examples. You can, of course, query him for any kind of image. So like any image, he can make ASCII text or more images. Oh, and when you want to have image in your idiom client, use add inline. And there's even more than just the fun part. There's also lots of script which really improves your efficiency doing your daily work. There are the scripts, for example, for GitHub, so you can query open issues, you can merge pull requests, you can open pull requests, you can list them, lots of stuff. I think there's about 10 different GitHub scripts around, each for their own purpose. And yeah, there are also scripts for Travis, for Jenkins, and yeah, lots of other really tooling around so that you can manage your live environment via your developer chat, which is pretty cool. So to extend hubot, it's pretty easy. There are a few interfaces you can speak to. The first very obvious one is like commands directed to him. That's what you've seen in the example. You could go and like hubot, do this and that. And then you can evaluate the string and just react on it. You can also react on any word spoken, so it's not that you have to have this hubot prefix. So for example, when somebody chatted lol, he can react and say, oh, Ruffle, he said lol, for example. Or maybe you can also use this for more real work stuff, I don't know. Which is also pretty cool. He has an HTTP interface. So for example, when you have GitHub merge request hooks, so when you merge some code in, GitHub can post an HTTP URL, and there's also a script around. You can put this hubot script in, and hubot will analyze the commit and write into the chat who committed and what and the message and stuff. And there's also an event system. The event system is for when you have, for example, a deploy script. So you want to deploy your code into production, and you want to maybe open source it, that the scripts can communicate with each other. So you have one script which actually do the deploy, and one script which can trigger the deploy. So they can communicate over this node event emitter interface. Yeah, to just not talking, and I want to show some code examples. I've prepared some really basic examples. The first one is from the inbuilt scripts. It's the parrot, so he just repeats what you wrote to him. Yeah, it's starting like every node module, so you're doing this export stuff, and then you have this robot object with different methods on it, and in this example we have the response. So it's like whenever he hears his own name, like hubot, echo, blah blah blah, and then he will just respond blah blah blah. You can steer it with the regex shown there, and hand over a callback function, and yeah, you're just putting the message out. It's pretty simple. And there's also HTTP interface, which I like to show here. So you just have, again, there's this robot object, you have a router, and then you can define the methods and the routes on it. And you can also hook this up, so you can have like a HTTP post route, and hubot can then write into the chat. So you can do lots of different things with it. So how do we put this together? So how do we actually do the deployment with the chat robot? And I'd like to tell you the story how we at my old employer does that. So first of all, the scenario, I worked at Digital Pioneers back then. We had our code on GitHub. The apps were hosted on Scalarium. Scalarium is now known as Opsworks, so they got bought by Amazon. And yeah, it's a platform as a service provider. And we had just 2 developers plus a few students. And we used Java as a developer chat. As I mentioned at the beginning, for continuous delivery, you need a lot of tests. And to be honest, we didn't have them. So I don't want to do this continuous delivery stuff. Oh, at least not this automatic deploy. This was, I have too much fear. But I was really curious about this. So I spent the whole weekend hacking together a script which make hubot to communicate to Scalarium, or Opsworks now. Sorry. And yeah, here's how it works. So this is originally the first deployment I've ever did. So I looked it up into my ADM chat log. So our bot back then, his name was Charlie. So whenever there's Charlie mentioned, it's basically hubot. So you can just give it your own name. And I said to him, Charlie, Scalarium list apps. So I just basically get a list of all our apps around. So the app was called Stuffle, and it's they are identified by, I guess it's a SHA-1 or MD5 hash. And yeah, there's 3 different environments. And next command is Charlie Scalarium deploy, and then the hash of the environment you want to deploy to. But you might want to question now, so where do we know where he get the code from? You can enter the source code into in the Scalarium web UI, so it's nothing to do with hubot here. And then I've also passed a message, like a deploy message. And then he goes like, yeah, okay, I'll do deploy. And then I was pretty lucky that it worked. And what's it here? About 2 minutes later, the deploy was actually successful and worked out. So what happened behind the scene? Please don't yell at me. The code is not that cool, and now I know better. But I want to show you what's real around. So this is what you still will find on GitHub. First of all, we have this CoffeeScript class, which has like all the methods, like getting the applications, getting the clouds, and the actual deploy and stuff. And so you don't have to read it now, so you can look it up. It's just to get you an overview how much code it is to make it actually work. And this is the deploy itself. So as you might see the same structure as in the smaller examples before. So I directed him like Scalarium list apps, Scalarium list clouds, and the actual deploy command. I'm just calling the object. Yeah. So as I mentioned, we don't do this real continuous deployment. So we deployed by chat. So whenever we got hooked that our continuous delivery, continuous integration system was successful, we got into the chat and deployed the app. But what could be next? We could hook it up like to GitHub, to Travis, or to Jenkins. So whenever the continuous integration run was successful, we could do the deploy. So we can do unattended deployments, or like everything. So it's so open, you can build like whatever you want. And yeah, like normally, so this is the end of the talk. But as I mentioned, I gave it once. And people often came to me and chatted with me. And I've also discussed it in my current company a lot, if it's a cool thing to have it. And yeah, I've learned some stuff. And I think all this conference here is about sharing and sharing knowledge and like sharing war stories. And all the stuff I showed here is not what I would consider the best thing to do. But still, you can do lots of cool stuff with hubot. But when we're talking about deployment, there's a better way how to actually do it. Like I mentioned at the beginning, you often go like doing SDP, git s4n up, and git pull on your service. So it's like the push method. So you have this one instance which pushes the code. Like who of you does it like this, like pushing the code? Yeah, okay. I'm curious what the rest does because there are only two ways. Because what's actually the better way is like pull deploy. So even the hubot script I showed you, it's like push. So there's this single hubot instance which pushes the code or triggers the deploy. This has lots of disadvantages. For example, when you're not a startup and you're a grown company, and you have like a bunch of servers, like we actually have 300 servers around. And when you're doing this push deploy, so like this, I want to deploy now, so the just-in-time deployment, what happened if one server is offline, right? He won't get this code. So depending on your application, your whole application might be broke, or you have just some misbehavior in it. And it also doesn't scale. And this refers to the BitTorrent deployment I mentioned at the beginning. They solve it some kind of different. But when you have your source on just one place, and all of your like 2,000 servers going to this one place and fetching the code, it will come to a point where you can't deliver. So where you can't serve them all. And you also have this single point of failure. So this one truth where your code lives, when it's down, you can't deploy either. So what's pull deploy about? Pull deploy fixes most of the problems. Which it doesn't fix is like a single source, so single point of failure. But imagine all of your servers, when you want to do continuous deployment, are just pulling the code. Like imagine there's a cron job, which goes like every 30 seconds, triggering one instance and asking for new code. So it's not like pushing, and the service goes like, whoa, here's new code, so what should it do with it? And the servers go to this instance asking if there's something new and then pulling it. This scales a lot more, and when a server is offline, or considered to be offline, or any fencing problem or routing or whatever, when he's back online and the source origin is reachable again, he just pulls back the code, which is way better. Yeah, that's it. So please, even if I mentioned the pull deploy thing at the end, grab your own hubot, introduce it to the colleagues, play around, and deploy your stuff. That's the end. Thank you.